Hi, everyone. Today we are taking a look at medieval Europe as a part of the Middle Ages. And Beastie Boys aside, the idea of medieval Europe is really about safety and protection. The Middle Ages are divided up into three different time periods. You have the early Middle Ages, which lasts from the fall of Rome, 476 CE, until about 1000 CE. This time period, for the most part, is marked by a lot of local leaders. Nobody really has enough power. So think like if our school principals kind of left, there's nobody overseeing the entire school. It's up to each of the individual teachers to take care of their own individual classrooms. And this is really because Rome took care of everything. And with Rome gone, you can't really do the same thing. The High Middle Ages, this is really the time period that you think about medieval Europe. So if you think medieval Europe, typically you're going to think castles and knights in shining armor and princesses and dragons and all that good stuff. This is that time period. We see the widespread use of a system called feudalism, which we'll get into in the next couple of days here, and also the power of the Roman Catholic Church skyrockets. At this time in Europe, the only religion in Europe that is followed is really Catholicism. And then we have the late Middle Ages, and this is really a transitional time period. This is where the Middle Ages move from that time of knights and castles, etc., and we start to see it move out of the quote-unquote dark ages, where there's not a whole lot of learning going on in terms of cultural learning, in terms of literature and visual arts and those kinds of things. It's really designated much more so by a rebirth during this time period, where we start to see kind of those Ninja Turtle artists really flourish here. Early Middle Ages, some of the early leaders, we see Clovis emerge shortly after the fall of the Roman Empire. He introduces Christianity to his people. Clovis is from France, and that was a small part of the Roman Empire, but it had started to decline as well during that time period. And Clovis takes this idea of Christianity, which it's only been about 100 years since Christianity was made legal in the Roman Empire. So it's still relatively new in terms of people being allowed to practice this religion. And so people are moving away from the Roman system where you have all these different gods and goddesses, the names of the planets coming from Roman gods and goddesses, and into a more Christianized culture. And that's going to lead to our second leader here, Charlemagne. Charlemagne rules for a very long time. Charlemagne means Charles the Great, Le Magnifique en français, oui. And he unifies all of the Christian lands in Europe. He displays incredible amounts of leadership qualities. He takes over when he's 14 years old as a general under his father, and by the time he's in his early 20s, he is the leader of the French people, and he begins to consolidate all of these different groups of people in Europe under his rule. You can kind of take a look here at this map. This blue area, the Frankish Empire, that is what Charlemagne conquers by the end of his rule. So we see it's almost the same size as the western part of the Roman Empire. The very famous image that you see here, there's actually a statue erected in much the same style. We see the French fleur de lis, the very famous French symbol of monarchy, over here on the right-hand side. And he is going to be ruling over this entire region. He has support politically. Like Alexander the Great, he treats local leaders with a lot of respect. He says, all right, listen, you don't have to completely think of yourselves as slaves to me. You pay me the respect, listen to what I have to say, but ultimately, you know your local people best, so I'm going to leave you in charge. And he rewards them. He gives them titles for those who take over areas and fight for him. He has support militarily. He gives titles, again, to people who fight for him. He's a really strong leader, like Alexander the Great, like Achilles. He fights right alongside next to his men, and he's been doing it from a very early age. You can imagine being an 8th grader leading an army, and that's what Charlemagne is able to do. And finally, and probably one of the more interesting, is he has support spiritually. Pope Leo III, the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, the only religion in Europe during this time period, gives Charlemagne the church's blessing. He says basically, if you promise to protect the Christian lands of Europe from the advancing Muslim empires in the Middle East and North Africa, then I will say basically that God has chosen you to be our leader. He receives the church's blessing, and it's similar to a mandate from heaven or divine right to rule, where the Pope says that God has chosen Charlemagne to be the protector of all these Christian lands. Along with the notes today, you are going to have some writings. Please make sure that you pay attention to the writings and the absent corrections and complete those to ensure you get credit for them. Eventually, though, Charlemagne dies, and just like Alexander the Great, weaker leaders take over after he dies. That leads to chaos and confusion. Nobody is strong enough to hold together land as Charlemagne did. Um, People want power, including his sons. Nobody can hold it together like he could. So once again, Charlemagne creates this massive empire all across Europe, and just like the Roman Empire, once again falls and goes away. In addition to the inability of people to keep Europe together, even with trying to unify each other under the Christian religion, we have these barbaric tribes coming in. And what this really means is uncivilized or not Christian. Christian is the only empire, or the only religion in Europe during this time period. And so these people are not Christian, therefore they must be uncivilized in the eyes of these Europeans. We have the Muslims coming from North Africa and the Middle East. We see this debate over the Holy Land, what is today Jerusalem in modern day Israel and Palestine. That's going to come up again as we start to talk about the Crusades and the religious conflicts during this time period. We see the Magyars. They're from the Far East, what is today India and Pakistan. They are known for combat on horses, and that's going to last for a really long time period. This also gets into the Mongols, the Mongol horde, the great horde of Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan. These guys excel on horseback. Finally, the third group is a group that you may have heard of before. They're the Vikings from Denmark and Norway. Really, the term Viking is actually the job. The idea that you are a raider, that you go from town to town and you take what is necessary to help out your people. Technically, the people themselves are called the Norse, not Vikings. Vikings is a job. But at any rate, they show extreme brutality, lead raids on small towns, and so all of this chaos is going on at the same time period. So Rome had taken care of everything for people, and you have these now barbaric tribes coming in, these groups who are creating havoc all across Europe. And so that really brings about this need for feudalism. People needed to band together for protection. Previously, the Roman Empire had taken care of everything. If you didn't have food to eat, the Roman Empire had welfare programs for you. They had defense systems set up. They had military outposts on the edge of the empire to try and protect people. All of that has since gone away. So if you can't have a big structure, what you end up doing is getting a smaller structure. And like I mentioned, pretend like the principals are gone, and so it's up to the individual teachers. And I say, listen, guys, I'll take care of you right here in this classroom. Let's get together. It's a much smaller group, but by doing so, you're able to provide that protection for those people. So the king provides protection for a small area for those who live on his land. So the purpose for feudalism is really, if we were to boil it down, it's to organize society and protect all of the members of that society, to make sure no one is hurt, to make sure people have food, to make sure people can survive. The purpose of feudalism is to survive, and it does so through organization. Make sure everybody has his or her own job, to make sure that everybody can protect each other. Last writing that you have, please make sure that you do this in your own words, explain it in your own words. That's it. Have a great day. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know.